This is the video for 5.3 slope-intercept form. I am going out of order in 2 lessons in this chapter for a few reasons, but let's talk about what a parent function is. A parent function is the simplest function in a group of functions that have common characteristics. So the parent function for a straight line is y equals x. So I've graphed that for you, and you can see the slope of the linear parent function is 1 and the y-intercept is 0. That is the simplest form of a straight line. A linear equation is an equation that models a linear function. So in other words, a linear equation is the equation of a straight line. The y-intercept is the y-coordinate of a point where the graph crosses the y-axis. So in a linear parent function, the y-intercept is at 0. And finally, slope-intercept form. You do need to memorize this. So I said in this chapter, there are a lot of things you have to memorize. So I said start making yourself flashcards. You need to go ahead and add this to your flashcard set. Y equals mx plus b is slope-intercept form, and you need to be able to recognize that by name. M is your slope, B is your y-intercept. Now you should have learned about this last year, so this should be at least slightly familiar to you. So if you look at the parent function in slope-intercept form, you can see how my slope is 1 and my y-intercept is at 0. So now we're going to look at an equation and we are going to identify, well, what's the slope and what's the y-intercept. So when the equation is in y equals mx plus b form, the slope is always the coefficient of x and the y-intercept is always the constant. So here my slope is 5 and my y-intercept is -2. So pause the video and do the on your own and identify the slope and the y-intercept. So don't let the fact that the y is on the other side confuse you. Just rewrite it and put the y on the left-hand side if that makes it easier for you to see it. But the slope here is -1/2 and the y-intercept is at 2/3. Being able to recognize the slope and the y-intercept from these equations is going to be extremely important in just a few minutes when we start graphing these. So let's look at the next example. We're doing the same thing except we're going the other way. We're given the slope and we're given the y-intercept, and now we need to create the equation. So it says, what is the equation of a line with a slope of -4/5 and a y-intercept of 7? And there's your answer. There's the equation. So go ahead and hit pause and work out the next one. And you should have gotten y equals 3/2 times x minus 1. Notice I did not say plus a -1. If you wrote it that way, you're not wrong, but it's not appropriate form. You just want to say minus 1. 3/2 times x minus 1. Okay, now we're going to write an equation from a graph. So what's the first thing we need to do? We need to identify our slope. Our slope is our rise over our run, and here it's fairly simple because you can just count your units. I rose 2 and then I went to the right 1. And so my slope is 2. And what's my y-intercept? -2. Again, notice I didn't say plus -2. I just said -2. Remember what your y-intercept is. Your y-intercept is where the line crosses over the y-axis. It is the value of y when x equals 0. So go ahead and hit pause and create an equation for the next graph. And here's your answer. My slope is -2/2 and we reduce that and we say -1. My y-intercept is at 2. And notice when I write the equation, I don't put -1x, I just say -x. If you put -1x, again, you're not wrong, but that's just not appropriate form. People leave the 1 out and then they just say -x. Now we're going to write an equation from 2 points. So the first thing I need to do is I need to find my slope. So I take these 2 points, I label them just like we did the other day, and I have to find my slope. Do the keep, change, change so you don't make a math error. And so my slope is -3. So what do I know about this equation so far? I know my slope is -3. Well, in order to find an equation of a line, all you need is 1 point and the slope. So I need to take either one of these points and plug it in to find b. Let me show you what I mean. I know a point and I know my slope. As long as I know 1 point and my slope, I can plug it in to find b. And you can take either one of the points. I just took 2 and 1 because I thought it looked easier. I like 1s and 0s. I try to avoid negatives if possible. So now I'm going to plug it in. And I solve for b. And b is 7. So what's the equation of my line? Now these x, y variables, they represent coordinate points on a line. And there are an infinite number of coordinate points on this line. Here are 2 of them. But there's an infinite number of points on this line. But what's the one thing about the line that I know that will never change? This specific line has a y-intercept of 7 and a slope of -3. So once again, to review and write down your steps, when you're given 2 points and you want to find the equation of a line, the first thing you have to do is you have to find your slope. Then once you have your slope, you just take either one of the points, plug it in to find b, and then you create your equation. So if you need to rewind that and watch it again, please do so. And when you're ready, work out the on your own problem. Okay, so I want to create the equation of this line given these 2 points. So what did I say step 1 was? The first thing you have to do is you have to find your slope. And so you learned how to do that the other night. And so once I find my slope, I get 1/2. If you did not get 1/2 as your slope, pause the video, make sure you understand what I did, and redo it. And then you're going to have to redo the whole problem. Because if your slope's wrong, the rest of the equation's wrong. Okay, well now what do I do? Step 2, I need to find my y-intercept. I need to find b. So how do I do that? I plug in what I know to find what I don't know. Well, what do I know? I know my equation is y equals mx plus b. And what do I know? I know 1 point and I know the slope. Here's my equation, and I know an xy coordinate, and I know the slope. And so then I just take the xy coordinate and the slope, plug it in, and find b. And again, I can use either one. I'm going to use the one that looks easier though. And so all I'm going to do is plug it in to find b. And now I just use my algebra skills here If you want to pause the video to see what I did, I'm just solving for b. And now what do I know? I know my slope, I know my y-intercept, and so now I can create the equation. If you need to rewind that and watch it again, please do so. If you need to watch this while you're doing your homework, if you forget what you're doing, please do so. But just remember, you take what you know, plug it into the equation to find what you don't know. Figure out the slope. Once you know the slope, you can grab a point, plug it in, and solve for b. And finally, now we're going to graph a line. Here, my y-intercept is at -1. This is why we learned how to read these and to pull out, well, what's the slope and what's the y-intercept? My y-intercept is -1, and my slope is 2/1. So from this point, what am I going to do? I'm going to go up 2 and over 1, up 2 and over 1. I can also go down 2 and over 1, down 2 and over 1. And there's my line. Use graph paper. Don't skip count. Accuracy and precision matters. Where your points are located must be precise. Look at what I drew over here. If you memorize this, this can help you when graphing a line. If you have a positive slope, you can go up and to the right or down and to the left to put your next point. If you have a negative slope, you can go down and to the right or up and to the left. And it doesn't matter. If I have a positive slope, remember this is a ratio. If I have a positive slope, I can have a positive rise and a positive run. That's a positive slope. It's a ratio. If I have a negative rise and a negative run, that's still a positive slope. A negative over a negative is a positive. Here, it's a ratio of my rise over my run. If I have a negative rise and a positive run, that's still a negative slope. If I have a positive rise and a negative run, that's still a negative slope. So either way you want to go, either direction to graph your next point is okay. So here, what did I do? Up and to the right, and I also can go down and to the left to put my next points. Okay, so go ahead and hit pause and work out the two on your own problems. Okay, I want to graph them for you so you can watch me graph it. My y-intercept is at +4. My slope is -3/1. I went down and to the right. I can also from this point go up and to the left. As long as my rise is 3, my run is 1. 3, 1. Here I gave it a positive rise and a negative run. Here I gave it a negative rise and a positive run. Doesn't matter. Either way, it's a negative slope. And finally, the last example. Your y-intercept's at -8. And I'm going up 4/1. Because my slope is 4/1 and it's a positive line. See again, up and to the right, but I could also go down and to the left. Okay, so stop the video, do your homework. If you have any questions on your homework, email me. If you need me to work out any of the problems, if you get to a graph and you're stuck and the answer key is not helping you and you want me to actually work it out for you on video, I can do that and I can post that. That's no big deal. Just send me an email and let me know.